Hey, what's going on, guys? Going to be a trade recap from today. Finally, our QQQ trade has concluded at least the first phase of it. I still think that we have two more ranges that we can capitalize on, as well as a potential short if the chart does exhaust or hits targets before we can kind of reload. But you guys kind of knew the deal, right? I mean, we were kind of just being patient, expecting it to draw down into this gap fill here, right? This is essentially what I was waiting for. And then from that gap fill, I was looking right initially for the fill, and if it didn't fill, I expected it to come down to this high right here, which is obviously a daily high. Retested. I've said this many times. 2 days, pull back. Then we had our third day. We started to continue out. Fourth day, we really broke out and just kind of made a new high, and then really trended back up into this 500, 490 range, right? You guys can see this on the weekly as well. Obviously, if this level was lost, it was pretty bad in the sense that it could come back down to these weekly highs at 448. But I did emphasize that we had this nice weekly trend line here. If we pulled from here to like here, right, this is kind of what I was expecting to happen, right? Somewhere into that level, right? Does that look good? Oh, I hate how it does this on TradingView. Like doesn't snap properly sometimes, so it kind of gets a little messed up. And then if you have extended hours on, it gets even worse. But yeah, long story short, we kind of noted the 3 bar lower high here. Obviously, it failed this massive mother candle or this kind of top signal here. And then we gapped down. We sold down into these lows here, right? We kind of got close to the gap, but we pretty much touched this little higher low pivot. And then we made a lower high, and then we gapped down again, right? Now, it's important to talk about my first ad, which was technically right here. We take a look, right? I always do this. This is something I've always done, where I'll add the top of the gap initially if I start to see buying. Almost said power coming, but buyers just kind of step in at that level because we notoriously see gap traps, right? Something that looks like this, where it'll kind of break into the gap. People will go short into the gap thinking it's an easy fill. It'll close back above, and then that's the liquidity needed to not only get buyers that are kind of coming off the tail ends of bulls capitulating, right? Because if this gap breaks, you got to think sellers probably have their stop loss somewhere in the gap, or people see that happen and they just stop out themselves manually. So you have that kind of that counteraction between stops being triggered and then buyers absorbing those to get their fills, as well as sellers shorting in, right? And then it closes above and then they end up short covering. So I always just add the top and like for the potential of a gap trap. So this is where I started 1/4 of my position right at the top of this gap here, right, which was 471.29. I grabbed like a fourth of my position, and then I was waiting for the fill, right, to see if I wanted to add for the full size into that position off of the 468 gap fill. If you guys remember, right, it kind of just kind of nosedived, right? So it ended up coming to the top of the gap. It gave a little bit of a bounce, and then it kind of flatlined, and then it opened, right? Went higher a little bit. So this candle looked a little bit misleading at first, right? This is why I added. So we had clearly a bearish 15-minute orb candle, right? Next candle, we opened high, low, and then closed, right? So we initially had a nice little green candle that almost looked like tweezers at the time. But that's only why I added just 1/4 here. And of course, then we knifed down. We came all the way down to the bottom of the gap. And if you guys remember on the 5-minute and the 15, I just didn't see any volume, which we can still see here. There was nothing there just yet. So I didn't add the bottom of the gap. Instead, I just had like a really weird average at the top of this gap here that started on Wednesday, July 24th. And then I was just waiting, right? It was just a waiting game. At that point, I was testing the field to let it come down to 460.58, and that was another ad that I was going to have. We ended up breaking underneath that 460.58, if you guys remember, and then we ended up having a pretty good consolidation, right, for the next couple days here. As we ended up breaking underneath 460, this is obviously where I added again. So I'm just kind of lining up my ads for you guys. I had one there, right? I had one here. And then we started to note the accumulation that was kind of forming out on the hourly, where we're getting lower lows, right? Where these lows, although it looked like it was high volume on the daily, if we really dove into the 4-hour on extended hours, and I was trying to note this for you guys, take a look at the volume here, right? That hammer, not that, I guess you can call that a hammer, kind of coming with the highest volume, right? If we take a look at this entire sell-off, it was pretty much on declining volume, right? and then the most volume came in from these hammers here, right? This level, I guess this level here, which kind of started our low. Then we had the highest volume that came off this 4-hour hammer, right? And then we kind of came here. We had another hammer that kind of defended 460.58. And then for the most part, we started to decline on volume once again, right? We started to sell off on lower volume. But take a look once again, all the higher volume candles were these hammers. So we were starting to go into that 2 to 3 lower low accumulation that I always talk about, where we broke through the gap. We had technically our first lower low here, right? This was our second, and then our third was right here. Now let's talk about this, because I did add one more time, which was back here, right? Let's go to the 15. Remember, so we ended up breaking down all the way to this trend line that I want to show you guys really quickly, right? We broke down to it here on this day here, where we barely made a new low, right? Very, very incremental, which is what I talk about in terms of these 2 to 3 lower low accumulations, especially when you start to see the data aligning, which we were seeing. We were seeing buyers step in on the 4-hour and the hourly. The pretty much diverging volume, right, in terms of the sell-off, and then the buying pressure was kind of what was making these daily candles appear they were high volume sell-off. So you kind of had to analyze them on a lower time frame. And then to top that, right, we started to see sellers, once they were buying these, right, we can see these via dark pool, right, we saw these bids down at like 458, I think was the biggest one. And then once these were being accumulated, right, we started to see them lining their sell orders in mass volumes, right. I think we saw like an 87 or 67 print candle way up here at 480, right? So pretty big one, and they were just lining up everything. And we talk about this, right? When people are always like, why would they want to sell high? Dude, they don't sell low, guys. You don't want to sell things for cheaper than what it's worth. You want to sell it while it's high, right? Especially when people are buying that and feel like they mismoved and whatnot, right? In this chart, a lot of sentiment around this was extremely bearish, thinking that this was going to cave. It was going to come down to 448 and even fill this gap down here. Data wasn't aligning, right? Chart wasn't aligning. People were just looking at the daily and not really analyzing this really much further than that, right? That weekly trend line, I'm going to trust that a lot more than whatever the other people are saying, right? Especially with everything diverging. But yeah, I mean, the one thing that I did kind of make a mistake on was technically this ad up here, the 1/4 ad at 471.29. I wish I could have taken that back. I was happy with my ad here, which was at this 460 level once we reclaimed it, right? You guys can see we held it here. We held it here, and then when we knifed under, right, remember I told everybody I was waiting to add one last time to kind of create my full position off of this trend line, which it pulled down, and we added the trend line, and then it bounced up. And if you guys remember, I was like break even right around here. And I was like, oh man, we're going to have a great day. Like, this is going to go really good. And then it was just absolutely demoralizing, because this knife down here was about, what, 6.50, $6, now 50 cents. We'll just kind of keep it. I think it was a little bit more, right? Yeah, because we were technically up here. It was like 680 or something. Right, almost $7. But that was demoralizing, because that basically reset all the progress that we had made. I was down like 58%, so I was down. I think I was like $15,000, and it was painful, dude. It was painful. And I had like $30,000 in this trade, but right, you have to think about what I said, right? I mean, we have a pretty consistent method here where we look for those 2 to 3 lower low accumulations, and like I said, you can have this being your first, second, and then you usually get some kind of spring or some kind of capitulation move for those final ads, and we can note that that came from this Microsoft earnings, right? So Microsoft, as you guys know, sold off pretty drastically. Yeah, here in the after hours on Tuesday, right? And it really just sold into a pretty nice demand level, right? So you guys can see here, it kind of sold off right into this low right around here, right? And I don't know how else to put it. It was very, very simple place to kind of put your orders to buy at. It was the swing low of this entire move that really invigorated a new high here. So really just kind of tagged back out, down into this inventory and then marked back up. And obviously AMD did extremely well, which helped to lift NVIDIA, right? So NVIDIA had a really strong day. Amazon recovered. So tech overall, great bounce. It did exactly what I thought it would. And it pushed pretty much back up into this bearish progression gap, right? So if we technically take the close here up into where we went from our high today. I mean, that's an insane move. It's $17, right? I mean, I guess we went even higher than that, right? We went a little bit higher, so we went up to here, which is about 19 bucks, 4%. That's unheard of. So pretty good win here. Overall, I was a little upset because we did open like right here, right? And we kind of went a little bit higher, and contracts weren't in the .90s like I thought. So Kendra, I'm going to be talking for a while. Bye. Yeah, it's fine. Sorry, guys. So yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Uh, oh yeah, 94 is what I thought, or 90 is what I thought the contracts would open up at. Unfortunately, they didn't. Right? They opened like basically like up like $3, which is a little disheartening. And then it pulled back, and then we saw this dark pull print down here, right? And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna lose our progress again. So I was kind of worried, and I really tied a lot into this previous day high, right? I was like, okay, if this ends up breaking the previous day high, I think we're for sure going to trade back and do one last pull into this these daily lows in this general range, right? And collect inventory one last time before a markup, before FOMC. Thank God it kind of held, and then we started a rally, right? And I did have some premature cuts. I think at this point, we can all admit that this trade went a little bit longer than we would have liked. Right, when you accumulate with big money, you usually want to have more time on your side. 0816 might have been pushing it. But, all in all, I think the ads were great. I think this was a good thesis. I think the ads were great. I think this ad up here at 471, and I'll specify it again, is kind of the one that killed me because it pulled my average initially in the, what was it, like the 90s or the 100s, and then I added again at like the 60s, and then I added at the 4s, right? But all in all, right, this all kind of held within the thesis. Everything did very, very well. I just wish I would have made a little bit more on this gap up. But as it started to break through and breach this bearish progression gap, which is once again, right, this zone here between this candle and this candle, right? This is a zone, once again, that bears want to protect, right? They made progress by selling this down into this gap. They now want to protect this spot, right? And then in turn, right, if you end up protecting that, they're also going to want to protect this here, right? So they have two gaps to kind of play with here. Very interesting setup on QQQ, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it was, right? We ended up finally breaching the gap. Contracts where I ended up trimming were about 25 to 27%. I had over 500 contracts, guys. I had a lot of contracts, so I did trim for about like 16,000 or so, 17,000, and I kind of just let like 20% ride, and then we started to push up to this 471, which was the top of the bearish progression gap. We got this spinning top on kind of higher volume, and I was like, you know what, dude, I'm just going to take off another 10%. I did, and then this is kind of the area, if you guys remember, in between this bottom of the bearish progression gap and then the top. I did start puts here just in case we sold and had some kind of crazy move all the way down to 457. That would have been over a 2,000% win. And I put like 200 bucks into that, and I wasn't worried about losing that, right? I made like 16, 17,000. I'll toss in 200 to potentially make 5 grand, right? There's no big deal with that. And it didn't work, so that's all good. But we ended up holding, right, and then we ended up pushing up here, broke above the bearish progression gap, pulled back down into our zone here, and then everyone I kind of put it on everyone else. I was like, what do you guys want to do? And just kind of going into meta earnings and things like that. I saw other people cutting, so I decided to take my position from 20% down to 10, and then I took it down to 5%. So I only have a small handful of contracts now. And that's really not that big of a deal, right? I mean, if we can get some kind of reversal off of this 480 level, if we don't reach this, guys, let's say we start to sell in like after hours and we come back down, right, to like break under 460, 656, and start to kind of give lower highs on a smaller time frame, I think this is a great opportunity to re-add, right, and just kind of reinvigorate this trade off of this 457 spot, right? And then this is an opportunity to then trade it all the way back up to 480. You have to remember, I talked about it in chat, these zones like this, right, when you're building out a bottom, has to have a little bit more time than just 3 or 4 days, right? A base needs to be built where a foundation of bids that are passively there that can support price are there. You need to have the opportunity for buyers to step up their bids, which are your higher lows, and people will become more comfortable in trading this and trying to push this up, right, in tandem with sellers that are trying to sell higher, right? This is how a campaign is built. So it's very, very important to kind of let the process take place. I think this will fizzle out. But you know, if it hits 480 first, right, I'm not going to just be like super anxious to short this. I'll obviously keep an eye on volume and kind of watch how it's trading. Because if it does fizzle out around 480, I do think this opens up a pathway to then go short down to 490, or I'm sorry, 457. If we kind of still have strong volume and we start to like base around 480, right, we start to just kind of hang around here, I think we're going to go to 497, right? I definitely think that's our roll. And if you guys remember, the actual roll level, to see if anyone remembers, is pretty easy, right? It's right here. It's like right above that like 486, 86 zone. This was our old pivot, right, where we had our high made. We rejected it. We sold down, had a higher low. We pushed back up. We retested this. We sold. What do we get? Another higher low. So you guys can see this is where a lot of emphasis was placed in terms of sellers trying to prevent, but buyers started to step up price, right? And then we had our breakout, and this zone was just never really retested. We kind of broke down. So, I mean, this is a great spot, 486.86. I think this is a relatively untouched spot, if you will. And I mean, you can honestly take it from there, or you can trade it above that 488.80 gap if you guys would rather take that. And I mean, I think this goes right back up here to the close, right? So the close is right there, like 496, 497. And that is how I got this trade, guys. The idea for the 497 or 500 call. It remains to be seen if we end up pushing and making a new high, right, which would be right around here. I do think we do that. But there's a pathway, right? There's a pathway, right? And if we start to run out of inventory, we start to run out and exhaust, and there's a lot more sellers that we have to absorb versus buyers that are kind of pushing this up, the chart will pull back. I promise you guys, it will pull back. It'll find new buyers, right? It'll get these buyers down here, and then it'll start to make its way back up again. That's how it works. If this has enough people that were collected down here, right? Let's clean up the chart a little bit real quick for you guys. If it has enough people that were kind of collected down here, which there may be, right? We don't know how high this can go, but with earnings coming up, there's still a ton of data, right? I usually get a little sketched out by Wednesday, right? Usually the high or low of the week is made by Wednesday. NFP and Jolts week, and then tie it into like your FOMC, and all these earnings are always sketchy. I'm always on my feet. I'm always thinking of a reversal towards the end of the week from what happened going into that Wednesday, right? So there very well could be a lack of inventory in a recollection or a reinvigoration that needs to happen to keep going higher, right? And it definitely could happen. And if that happens, man, like I said, if this just ends up kind of like flatlining in here, right, and like doesn't hit 480 and this pulls back, I don't even know if it's worth a short. I would just wait to go long again, right, and then let this build back out to 480, resets your RR. You can re-wash the same trade twice. And like I said, then things become really easy because now I have like 17 grand on the house. I can basically put in what I had before, but not use my actual money. I can use like 15 grand of it if I want, or maybe 10 grand of it, which is only going to be like 1% TAV or 2% TAV. And then the rest is house money, and I could do the same exact trade. And what do you think I'll do this time? I'll hold it, bro, because I don't have as much risk in the trade. If I have some drawdown, I can then use my own money to add into that comfortably, and then get back up to that 5%. So a lot of flexibility happens if this does pull back. I'm always going to play the patient route, man. I think there's like I said, you got to look at this thing as like an onion. Ton of different layers to kind of work with, right? If we miss this move to 480, we can get the pullback in this range and then work from this range here to then try to target a breakout to, let's say it comes back, right? We can then target the breaking basis to get to this gap, right? And then if we end up kind of breaking and basing this gap, right, we can then take it to 496. So there's like two different layers to this chart. You just got to be patient. You got to look at volume. You got to let things kind of play out because I think in our minds we want things to happen very, very quickly. And they just don't work that way, right? Especially as an options trader and being retail, we have to be precise. We have to be patient. We have to let these equity build-outs happen. And that's just the name of the game, right? Which is how it works. And, a lot of these guys have the luxury of having a lot of money, and they don't have to worry about fills the same way as we do. And a lot of their stuff is equity, right? A lot of stuff is shares, so they don't have to worry about the Greeks, and they can just kind of stat pad, if you will, or have cheap insurance with options along the way. Now, I do want to show something really quickly because I was trying to wait for this all day because, like I said, this is a good opportunity to show you guys. Let's kind of go back. I'm going to remove all my drawings really quickly. Where was it? Oh yeah, here, back here, back here, back here. So if you guys remember, when I took these ads, I shouldn't have deleted everything, but when I took these ads off this like 560 spot, remember? And then we were kind of like celebrating our victory and shit like that. And then, we kind of consolidated above 460. I noticed back here, right, that we had the same exact thing. So Friday, July 26th, I believe that was the date. Or was it here? I think it was this day. Let me see. Let me go back to the 1 minute. Oh yeah, it was this day. So back here, right? So when we were kind of consolidating on this 460 level, and we never really broke out, right? The reason I zoomed in right there is because this was a dark pool print, right? And I was kind of like wondering. I was like, dude, we're definitely gonna pull down to 472.92 or 457.92. Sorry, I'm having dyslexia now. I've been talking, guys. Give me some credit. I've been talking for 20 minutes straight. I try to do this with no cuts or no edits, so my mouth is getting cottony. But there's a lot of stuff that I've been talking about, so bear with me. But yeah, we had this dark pool print in the pre-market down to 457.92. We never tagged it here. We kind of consolidated, and I was like worried, man. I was like, dude, we are gonna trade down. It's gonna knife and try to trade to this 457.92 level before it moves up. And then lo and behold, we got kind of like another miniature gap up from the close here to this one up here, right? And then to take a look, we had another one this very same day. Where was it? Where was it? Right here. Oh no, we didn't have one that time. My bad, my bad. So it was still like kind of just like that one level, right? It was like 457.92, and then I started to see on Trading Ticks they were bidding it down again. Kind of exactly what we're seeing right now, right? Where we have this same exact one that's having a pull down to 457.28, right? And then on SPY, it's all the way down to 542, right? So if we do run out of inventory, right, we start to exhaust, they are gonna sell it, guys, and they're gonna find a reason to do it. And what better reason than Apple, Amazon, NFP, whatever data is out there? There's a great opportunity to pull this right back down into this whole pool of inventory or a whole pool of potential bids, build further base, right? And then start to have higher low build out, right? So kind of just something like this, and then you can start to trend up, kind of hold, right? And then plenty of time for this to take, I don't know how long it would take. It can take as long as, 20 days, 30 days. But it has to build the bottom before it can start moving up and then building higher lows. But yeah, very, very important because like people are like, oh, that's not going to happen. And I'm like, dude, this literally happened on Friday, right? It happened on Friday. Where we never tagged 457.92. We started to just kind of consolidate here. Then we knifed. We grabbed the liquidity here. And if you guys go take a look, man, like I'm not lying. Take a look on the 4-hour and the daily. A lot of volume kind of came from that sweep, man. Like specifically here, right? We kind of pushed underneath. Ton of volume came with a candle close trying to get back above that. Obviously this one here, right? And then look where the move really stemmed from on, today, right? Kind of caught the bottom off that 457.92 one more time, and then it started to launch. So nothing's a coincidence, I promise. A lot of the times I sound crazy. I'm not. I've been doing this for literally 9 years now, 10 years. Trust me, the market, when it feels like you're safe, you're not safe. So, yeah, expect the unexpected. Just wanted to go over this really quickly. I'll go ahead and start the scan as well. Honestly, tomorrow I'll probably be really passive and probably just look to take Intel shares, but I'll still make a video here shortly. And before I forget, let's take a look, right? You guys can believe me on SPY. This level is being bid, right? Last time we saw one this high, it happened within like 3 days. These usually happen, from what I've seen, anytime it gets over 10. So 47 prints on SPY down to 542, right? And then if we take a look at our friend QQQ, right, same exact thing, 11 prints, which is over our 10, but a lot more money goes into SPY than QQQ, and they're both kind of bidding the same level, right? They're both bidding, I think it's Tuesday's close, right? Yeah, Tuesday's close. So I definitely think this comes down. So just kind of mark these levels on your charts. I would view these as support, even though it's, below us. You got to think that they're bidding to try to have MMs or market makers send price to them as the auction or the market starts to dry up. It will then look for willing buyers or willing sellers. There's a ton of buyers that are sitting at these levels, right? Price will facilitate towards those orders. That's how you have to think about them. then these orders will be filled, which are buys, and then the market will push up. So I'd want to side with these guys, but it can be a nice double dip where you can go short if you kind of find a break of a level, or you start to see whatever it is that you guys see to kind of align with a short thesis, right? You could theoretically short this back down to 542 or the other level. So just wanted to add this in here real quick.